This is the Mark 1 Toyota MR2, and I've been thinking about buying one of these for a really long time. So I've managed to get hold of this one from Toyota GB's Heritage Fleet to give it a jolly good reviewing. In this video, I'm going to talk you around the exterior and the interior design, find out about some of its interesting features and take it for a drive. I might even launch it to see how quick it is to 60 miles an hour, though I probably shouldn't really, because this car is owned by Toyota GB's Heritage Fleet, and they might be a bit mad if they see that I do that. I'm probably still going to do it anyway. Let's start off with a brief history of the MR2. So back in 1976, Toyota decided it wanted to build a car that was economical, yet also fun. So its designers went away and they came up with the idea of having a little two-seater sports car with the engine mounted in the middle. And in 1984, they revealed this, the MR2, to the world, and it went on sale in the UK in 1985. The Mark 1 MR2 has a really 1980s angular design. I love the look of it though. I absolutely do. That pointy front end, and of course this, a feature you're not allowed on cars anymore because they maim pedestrians. Pop-up headlights, they're so cool. The back end of this car is almost as cool with that flat design, the very 80s tail lamps, the body colour bumpers and the mud flaps, that recognisable spoiler there. It's really quite big. Not sure it does all that much. The flat back deck where the engine is underneath, and the twin exhaust pipes. You wouldn't mistake it for anything else, this car. It's so recognisable. Another couple of features I really like are this, the side air intake for the engine and the secondary spoiler on the roof that says Toyota on it. If you think the outside of this car is very 80s, then check out this interior. It really is of its time. Just the design of the dash. And the instruments as well. And look at this steering wheel. The only stalks that you have on the steering column are the indicators. And because this is a Japanese car from before the noughties, the indicators are on the right, whereas now they've moved them over onto the left like all the European cars. You're probably thinking, where the heck are the controls for the lights and the windscreen wipers? Well, they actually appear. So those are the windscreen wipers and those are the lights. I love that. Every time you turn that, the lights go up and down, and you can just see them from inside here popping up. So you've got your ventilation controls here, and this car has no air conditioning because air conditioning really wasn't a thing on British versions of cars in the 1980s. You could get air conditioning in the US and Japan though. And check this out, we've got a cassette player. I love this center console and the rather phallic gear knob. I mean, look at that. That's just rude. Now, we might not have air conditioning, but we do have some other mod cons, such as central locking, electric windows, and, wait for it, electric door mirrors. Wow. Back here, you've got some storage for bits and pieces, although things I'm sure will fall out of there when you brake. Under here though, look, space for your cassette tapes. Under here is your cigarette lighter and your ashtray. Now, you don't have ashtrays in cars these days, but they were in all cars in the 1980s because pretty much everyone smoked. Here you've got a little area which is perfect for holding your pound coins for parking. And look at this recessed area on the dash. I don't know what it was used for back in the day, but it's perfect for holding my Samsung Galaxy S20 Ultra. I can't believe it. There's some more storage here in the glove box, which is lockable. That's quite a mod con in the 1980s, and a little tray there as well. It's very nice. I especially like the seats. They're super comfy and they're covered in velour. How 80s is that? So you can actually adjust the lumbar support, which is good. You don't get that standard on BMWs and Audis. And you can even adjust the side bolsters, which is quite unique. So you can really get it hugging your body. I want to show you this. This car's a sunroof, so I can access it, look like removing this panel. Then you let the light in and then you can open it a little bit like that to let the smell of the 1980s out. I like the way that you've got some more velour in the doors, and there's carpet here in the lower part of the doors. Carpet on the doors for the win, like in my Porsche 996 actually. In fact, when you squidge the materials, it's all pretty, you know, soft and squidgy and high quality feeling. I think Japanese cars went downhill a little bit in the 1990s and the early noughties. This feels really quite nice. Interesting. Now, you might not think a car this small would be particularly practical, but it does have an okay size boot. And it's nice and long, so you can fit a set of golf clubs in here. And look, here's an original brochure for the car. Look at that. If you need to carry some more luggage, don't worry. This car has a front boot, a fruit. Check it out, look. Yes, you've got your spare wheel under there, but you could squeeze in some soft bags if you really needed to. Underneath this compartment is the engine. So it's a 1.6 litre, 16 valve, double overhead camshaft fuel injected engine. It puts out 128 horsepower and 105 Newton meters of torque. It drives the rear wheels via a 5-speed manual gearbox, although you could get a 4-speed automatic. Ugh, I wouldn't suit this car. Now in Japan, they actually had a 1.5 litre engine with just 85 horsepower. Ugh, you won't want that either. But you could get the car outside of Europe with a supercharged version of this 1.6, and then it put out 145 horsepower and 195 Newton meters of torque. That car could do 0 to 60 in 6.5 seconds, whereas this naturally aspirated version is supposed to do it in around 8 seconds. But let's see about that right now. It's time to launch the old Mark 1 MR2. Now, don't be mad at me, Toyota, if you're watching. I'm gonna go easy on it. Got my specialist timing gear there. I want to see what it'll do 0 to 60. I'm gonna start the car, and I have to use an immobiliser. Look how very 1980s. Just put the key in there, then just reach that immobiliser into the little connector. Yep. Now, for all of you who are saying, what, you're about to launch a car and you've just started it, don't worry, I've just driven it for an hour to get here, so it's nice and warm. Anyway, let's go. I'm not going to be too abrupt on it, but let's see what it'll do. It's so nice, this engine. Come on, what are we going to do? 0 to 60 in 9.15 seconds. Actually, do you know what? I'm going to try just one more go. Here we go. Where's that bite? Come on, little car. Come on, what are you going to do? Oh, yes, I did better that time. 8.91 seconds. I'll take that. I'm very pleased with that. Sorry, Toyota. It'll be fine though. Didn't slip the clutch, didn't ram the gears home. So if I was really brutal on it, it would definitely do around 8 seconds, I reckon. Now, if you're thinking about buying a Mark 1 MR2, you need to get your head around the pricing because they're rather expensive. So I was looking at these cars about 5 years ago, and you get a decent one for around 3 grand. Nowadays though, 3 grand will get you an absolute rotter. An okayish one is going to be 8 grand, and this one here, according to Toyota GB, is worth £15,000. So you've got to make sure you choose a good one if you buy one of these things. Even though this car first arrived in the UK in 1985, by the end of that year, Toyota had facelifted it. And this is the facelift version. It gets a redesigned front bumper. It had some changes to the suspension, that lock on the glove box, and some other bits and pieces that were different. They also introduced a T-bar model, which was sort of like a Targa top, but with a bar in the middle for improved rigidity. You don't want that car though, because they tend to leak around the roof seals. The main thing to watch out for on this car though is rust. The worst area for rust is the rear wheel arches and the rear wings. They can really rot out. Another place to check for rust is down in here, because the water can gather and just settle and do a lot of damage. On early 1985 cars, this bit was made of metal and it gets stone chipped, and that would allow the water to get in and it would just rot out. Good job they actually changed it for plastic. You're also going to need to look in the boot and lift up the carpets and have a look at the corners, because that will rust out if water has gathered. This car is completely clean though. No wonder it's 15 grand. To help avoid the rust, you're better off going for a UK car, because Japanese imports didn't have the same level of rust protection. Reason being that in Japan, they don't use salt on their roads, so they just don't need the same kind of treatment. Bring them over here and then they're exposed to salt and they just rot worse than the British cars which have been treated. Another thing to watch out for on an MR2 is crash damage, because it's a mid-engine sports car, rear-wheel drive with no driver's aid, so very easy to spin in the wet. Check for even panel gaps. They're all wonky, could have been crashed. Also look for mismatched paint colours, because once again could signify that it's been repaired after an accident. Then there's mechanical issues to look out for. Now the engines on these cars are really tough and will do over 100,000 miles, no problem at all if they've been well looked after. You want to look for regular oil changes every 6,000 miles preferably. Also make sure the cam belt has been changed every 60,000 miles or 5 years. Another thing to look out for is the coolant. You want to make sure it's got red coolant in there, because that's official Toyota coolant. If that gets too dilute or you use the wrong kind of coolant, you can actually blow a head gasket, which can cause a lot of damage. When you go out for a test drive, try and find some speed humps to drive over and listen out for any knocking sounds coming from the front wheels, because that could signify that the bushings for the steering rack or the drop links are going. Now that's not too much of a problem because it's quite an easy DIY fix. Another problem with these cars is that the handbrake can sometimes seize on. So after you've been for a test drive, just feel if the rear brake discs feel hot. That could signify that that caliper has seized. Also, you can rock the car and make sure that it just moves quite easily like that. The last common problem with the Mark I MR2 is with its gearbox. They can have a tendency to pop out of fifth gear. To make sure the car that you're test driving doesn't have that issue, get into fifth gear, drive along, floor the accelerator and abruptly lift off. Do that quite a few times. If it doesn't pop out of fifth, it's probably all right. Another issue it can have is the second gear synchromesh can go. Just make sure that it goes into second gear nice and smoothly without any kind of grinding or notchiness. Should be fine if it does. So then, what's this little Mark I MR2 like to drive? It's absolutely lovely. It's just so small, so dinky, so unique. One of the things that really stands out is the visibility. Look at this, you can see so much. The dash is really low, that nose just breaks away to the road. It's almost like you're sat on the road yourself. And these pillars, they're really thin, so the glass area is so good in this car. Really nice, you feel connected to the road. You can really see what's going on around you. It makes it maneuverable and dead easy to drive in town. What also makes it easy to drive in town is the suspension. So nowadays we're used to sports cars having rock hard suspension, just keep them dead flat in the turns. The downside of that is that they're just a bit bumpy when you're just driving them normally. This, it's nice and soft. Part of the reason for that is that it's light, so it weighs about a ton. Now back in the day, it was considered a little bit on the heavy side, this car, when you compare it to something like a Peugeot 205 GTI. But by today's standards, it really is a lightweight. Yes, it might lean in the corners, but you can tell what's going on because the steering, it's just so feelsome. There is no hydraulic assistance, it's just you holding onto the wheels which are holding onto the road, so you can feel exactly what's going on. And there's no weight of an engine over the nose, so it's just so light and responsive when you turn into a corner. And then there's the gear change. Oh, yeah, that's a nice gear change. It's not the shortest throw, it's not quite as short as in my Mark II Mazda MX-5, but so nice, the feeling. And, well, I might have joked about the look of the gear knob. It's perfect for your hand. There is a slight problem with this car in town, and it's when you're going really slowly. So even though there is no weight over the nose, if you're maneuvering and you're stationary, like, oh yeah, it does require a little bit of effort to steer. But once you're moving a bit, it's not too much of a problem. That's what it was like though, driving in the 80s. Another thing I really like about this engine is the throttle response. Just like that, flex your foot, just picks up immediately, it's lovely. Oh, this engine just revs for days. 16 valve, twin cam, after about 4,000 RPM, you feel it step up and really just like rev out nice and smoothly. The red line is at 7,500 RPM, but I'm not going there today. Not quite anyway. It really does though make you just want to keep revving this car out. It is fun when you're going quickly. You do really have to think about where the engine is on this car though. You don't want to be changing your mind when you're going into a turn, suddenly lifting off or being really abrupt with the steering, especially if it's wet, because those rear tyres, they're not very big by today's standards. So you just have to treat it with respect. So you do then think about driving the car and getting yourself set up for a corner and just driving as you should do, applying the power to get the weight over the back as you're coming out of the turn, make use of that mid-engine layout. One thing that has surprised me are the brakes. They're pretty good. But, oh, yeah, there's no ABS, so you've got to be very, very careful. It's a bit smoky. Poor tyres. When you're coasting along on the motorway, there's a disadvantage of having that engine behind you because it just drones on in your ear hole. There's also quite a bit of wind noise there. While I'm waving up there, driving one-handed at 70 miles an hour in this thing, I am acutely aware that if I have an accident, this thin pillar, while it may give me good visibility, it's just going to fold into my head. So you do have to treat this car with respect. No driver's aids, no ESP, none of that kind of nonsense, and hardly any crash protection. You're basically in a tin can. And that's the thing about it, you do just have to think a little bit more about when you're driving it. While that's a bit bothersome, you can always cheer yourself up by just going like that and popping up your headlamps. Though they are a bit of a safety issue as well, because if you hit a pedestrian with them, you're going to make a mess. Anyway, let's put them down. Love this car though, absolutely love it. It just wants to be spanked. Do you know what I'm going to do? I'm going to get more heritage cars from manufacturers and do reviews on them. Let me know in the comments if you want more videos like this. So then what's my final verdict on the Toyota MR2 Mark 1? Well, I think it's a really cool little sports car, and it's just so light and nimble and fun to drive. Would I buy one, considering they're 15 grand for a good one now? Probably not. I just wish I'd bought one about 5 years ago when they're only about 5 grand. Oh well. I hope you all enjoyed the video. If you did, please give it a like. Also, let me know some of the cars you'd like me to review in the comments below. Please make sure you subscribe to this channel and hit the bell icon to turn your notifications on. And if you want to watch some more videos, they'll be in the video window somewhere around there.